Speed reading. In truth, to attain to interior peace, one must be willing to pass through the contrary to peace. Such is the teaching of the sages. Swami Brahmananda. There was a professor of classics at Dartmouth whose name I cannot remember. It's a rarity, but it's just as well. I was getting a C in his course in Greek classical literature. I got a C on his first exam and on his second one. I was a second semester sophomore and was still having trouble keeping up with the work in my classes. I had just finished a course in speed reading, which my advisor had told me would help me, but it did no good. I was still getting C's, and so I went to this professor of Greek classical literature and asked him what I should do to improve my grade. He was an old man with glasses that magnified his eyes when he looked through them. He had sparse hair, shaky hands and fingers. His notes were on once white pages from which he read to us in class each day, but the pages had turned yellow. The edges of the pages were torn. He was what was known as the proverbial tight ass. "Take the speed reading course," he said to me. "That will bring you up to snuff." I said nothing. I didn't tell him that I had just completed the speed reading course, but it had done me no good. I left his office in despair. I didn't know what to do, and then it hit me. I would beat the old bastard at his own game. Those yellow pages, torn as they were on the edges, gave me the idea. The last 6 weeks of his class, I stopped studying entirely. I went to class. I listened to his lectures, but I took no notes. I just sat there. 3 weeks before the class ended, I went to the reference desk in the library, Baker Library, with the big clock tower. The reference desk was in the basement. I remember it well. The moldy smell and the Orozco murals with a picture of the bearded Christ chopping down his own cross. I knew that all of the old examinations for each course were kept on file there. I took out the final examinations for the Professor of Greek Classical Literature's course for the last 10 years. Then I sat down in that moldy old library and plotted out the questions I thought he would ask on this year's final exam. I saw as I looked back over the 10-year period that one year he would ask a certain question and the next year another. The odd years were filled with certain questions and the even years with other ones. I wrote down the questions, question after question, which I thought he would ask on this year's exam. It was an odd year. Then I went to the Dartmouth bookstore and got the Barron's Classic for the Greek classical literature course I was taking. I looked at the questions and saw that the ones I had plotted out for this year's exam were all right there in the Barron's Classic, as well as all the answers. I wrote down the answers to the questions I thought would be on this year's exam. I memorized all of the answers to these questions. When I went into the Dartmouth gymnasium to take my final exam, my heart was beating so intensely I thought it would break through my chest. I sat down and waited for the examination to be passed out. The young student who read for the professor all year came around and handed out the exams and the necessary blue books. I opened the exam And would you believe it? The exam consisted of question after question, each question, the answer to which I had written down and memorized. I couldn't believe my eyes. I wrote for 3 hours without stopping. I filled 3 blue books. It was the only time I ever filled more than 1 blue book. When the bell had rung, signaling the end of the exam, I was still writing, and when I left the gymnasium, I was still writing in my own mind the answers to the questions. I went home with a smile on my face, and in my heart, I knew I had done it. The professor gave me an A on the exam and an A in the course. It's the only A I ever got in my first 3 years at Dartmouth. I am sad to say that creativity was not high on the list of Dartmouth professors, and if it was soon stolen and put into an article or a book with the professor's name on it. I hated Dartmouth, both as an undergraduate and as an assistant professor of German. It was a place that destroyed the creativity of the soul. I never go back there. I never pay my class dues, and I never give money to any Dartmouth scholarship fund. I also don't cast my vote for the new members of the Board of Trustees. There is one German saying which applies so aptly to Dartmouth College. Der Trog bleibt immer derselbe, nur die Schweine wechseln sich in der ersten Reihe. The trough always remains the same, only the pigs change in the first row.